Hey everyone, and welcome to the Puerto Rico Energy Forum's latest news analysis. We're trying a new format to bring you the most recent news and a bit of our analysis. We'll still be releasing our regular conversations with energy sector experts, but this keeps us and you up to date with the most topical news and what we think about it. On that note, let's jump in. It is mid-February, and there's a lot going on. I personally am without power for the second day in a row, and you might think there's a storm or extreme weather. Both wrong. It's just another day in Puerto Rico. Now, the other challenge ahead of me, I'm going to try to cover 10 stories in 10 minutes. Here's the top news. The Energy Bureau just reminded everyone who's actually in charge. And it's not the companies running the grid. After discovering that FEMA reconstruction funds got quietly reshuffled away from transmission work, regulators ordered PREPA, LUMA, and Genera to explain how $1.9 billion disappeared from distribution projects and reappeared in generation budgets. This is the ref calling a penalty, and it matters. But before we celebrate too loudly, let's remember this is the same Energy Bureau that approved the Power Expectations Emergency Generation contract in December, while explicitly stating it conducted no due diligence whatsoever, rubber stamping a deal that jumped from 19 cents per kilowatt hour to 32 cents per kilowatt hour with a contractor whose principal has prior felony convictions. Progress, when it happens, is inconsistent at best. The Bureau can demand accountability one month and abdicate it the next. That's not regulatory maturity, that's regulatory whiplash. But the fact that they're asking hard questions about FEMA funds now, that still matters. You take the wins where you can get them, even when the same institution just handed you a loss. Now, 10 stories shaping Puerto Rico's energy landscape. Line number 1. The Energy Bureau catches the FEMA fund shuffle. I just mentioned this, but it's worth repeating. Here's your headline. Regulators just found nearly $2 billion that was supposed to fix your neighborhood's power lines, but somehow ended up allocated elsewhere. FEMA allocated $10.7 billion in 2020, with 91% assigned to transmission, distribution, and substations. But consolidated project lists submitted last year slashed active T&D projects from 571 to 282, leaving 289 inactive despite $402 million in sunk costs. The new allocation dramatically favored legacy generation assets, flipping FEMA's original damage-based funding on its head. The Energy Bureau ordered a 15-day reconciliation explaining how much money can be recaptured by eliminating duplication and reactivating priority projects. The Bureau's financial analysis suggests a combination of reserve allocation and Section 406 and 428 reconciliations could free more than $1.9 billion. If you want to understand how this mess happened in the first place, read the September 2025 Office of Inspector General report on PREPA FEMA coordination failures. The OIG documented systematic breakdowns in project management, contract oversight, and interagency communication that enabled exactly this kind of fund reallocation. The report shows this wasn't an accident. It was the predictable result of institutional dysfunction. But the Energy Bureau caught it, which means oversight is working better than project execution. That's progress, sort of. The money isn't gone, it just needs to be redirected back to where Congress intended. Headline number 2. Ratepayers revolt against permanent rate hikes. But the real crisis is that basic utility economics are broken. In the first 4 days of public hearings, 39 customers and entity representatives testified against LUMA's proposal to make temporary rate increases permanent. The headline is Ratepayer Revolt, and that's real. People showed up, testified, brought data. But here's the uncomfortable truth underneath. Rates have to cover the cost of operations, not profits, not bonuses, just basic operating costs. And right now they don't. Puerto Rico is stuck in a brutal conundrum. The system costs what it costs to operate. Aging infrastructure, expensive fuel, debt service, emergency repairs, those costs are real. But ratepayers can't afford them because incomes haven't kept pace and service quality doesn't justify higher bills. So we're trapped. LUMA needs revenue to operate the grid. Customers need affordable rates to survive. Both statements are true, and they're in direct conflict. The only way out is fixing the underlying economics. Deploy cheaper generation, reduce operating costs through efficiency, restructure or discharge the debt, get us out of bankruptcy, and improve service quality enough to rebuild trust. None of that happens by denying rate increases alone, but approving them without corresponding accountability just transfers the pain without solving the problem. The Energy Bureau has until mid-April to thread this needle. There's no good answer, only least bad options. Headline number 3. Federal emergency orders have been extended, but DOE admits what everyone already knows. The Department of Energy renewed emergency grid orders through May of 2026, and the justification document is surprisingly candid. The island continues repairing critical infrastructure, but with delays, and forced outage rates remain high. The DOE notes that repairs suffer numerous delays due to funding authorizations, contractual disputes, and supply chain problems. Energy Secretary Chris Wright framed renewal as ensuring critical work advances, and these orders have helped restore up to 820 megawatts of baseload capacity. Here's the honest assessment. Emergency authority is being used to cut red tape that would otherwise stall essential repairs. Vegetation management, unglamorous but critical, is accelerating. That's real progress. But we still need emergency powers 9 years after Maria. Emergency authority is a tool, not a strategy. It works when paired with actual planning and execution. The trick is using emergency powers to exit emergency conditions, not normalize them. Right now, we're doing both simultaneously, making genuine progress on capacity restoration, while also institutionalizing crisis governance. Time will tell which trajectory wins. Headline number 4. Over 126,000 customers were hit by load shedding, and Carraizo Dam repairs threaten metro water supply. Load shedding left more than 126,000 Luma customers without power as the grid struggled to balance supply and demand. This is what happens when available generation hovers around 60% of installed capacity. But controlled load shedding, while frustrating, is actually grid operators doing their job, choosing planned rotating outages over system-wide collapse. It's triage. The patient is stabilized, but not healthy. And speaking of infrastructure triage, the Carraizo Dam is undergoing emergency repairs that will interrupt water supply to hundreds of thousands of metro area residents. So now we have simultaneous energy and water infrastructure emergencies affecting the same population. The Aqueduct and Sewer Authority, Acueductos in Spanish, announced service interruptions while they fix critical dam infrastructure, work that can't wait but will impact residential and commercial water users across San Juan, Carolina, Trujillo Alto, and surrounding areas. This is what decades of deferred maintenance looks like. Cascading infrastructure failures that force impossible choices about which emergency to address first. Here's the reality. In both cases, we're managing decline, not building resilience. The real fix requires sustained investment in infrastructure, plus the institutional capacity to maintain it once it's built. Headline number 5. Battery storage moves from PowerPoint to construction. The Oversight Board approved Ecoelectrica's $131.1 million and 20 megawatt battery storage contract, and Genera's BEST program is deploying 430 megawatts of storage across 6 locations. These aren't just renewable integration projects, they're grid stabilization infrastructure designed to provide backup power and smooth out the voltage fluctuations and frequency instability that plague Puerto Rico's system. Think of batteries as shock absorbers for the grid. When generation drops unexpectedly or demand spikes suddenly, batteries can respond in milliseconds, much faster than firing up a diesel generator. That rapid response prevents the kind of cascading failures that turn a single plant outage into island-wide blackouts. Strategically placed batteries will reduce forced outages, improve power quality, and buy time for slower responding thermal plants to come online during emergencies. Contracts are signed, money is allocated, and construction is beginning. Ecoelectrica's project will try to take full advantage of federal ITCs, without which the project cost could spike from $16,000 per megawatt per month to over $20,000. This is the same type of project that Infinigen was approved for 50 megawatts in Isabela and 20 megawatts in Salina. Seems to me these are far more significant than many of the stalled generation projects and can be a long-term flexibility tool beyond the immediate benefit. Headline number 6. Municipalities push back on Luma streetlight servicing deal amid transparency concerns. The Energy Bureau ruled that municipal participation in streetlight servicing is legally viable, but opposition is growing to Luma taking over luminaire restoration from municipalities. This is a fascinating case study in how energy governance works, or doesn't, at the local level. Streetlights are infrastructure that municipalities have historically maintained, understand, and control. Transferring that responsibility to Luma centralizes control, but potentially reduces local responsiveness. Mayors argue they know their communities better and can prioritize repairs more effectively. Luma argues centralized management creates economies of scale and consistent standards. Both are probably right, which makes this a genuine governance dilemma rather than a simple power grab. What's really at stake is accountability. If Luma controls streetlights and they don't work, Who do residents blame? If municipalities keep control but lack resources to maintain them, same question. The Energy Bureau's ruling that municipal participation is viable suggests a hybrid model might work, letting municipalities that want to retain control and have the means to do so, while others transfer responsibility to LUMA. That flexibility is probably the right answer, but it requires coordination and clear service level agreements. Otherwise, you get the worst, fragmented responsibility with no one truly accountable. Headline number 7. Energy Bureau greenlights 200 megawatts from power barges, and the fuel barge runs aground. The Energy Bureau approved bringing power barges to generate 200 megawatts, adding urgently needed capacity while permanent solutions remain under construction. Here's your metaphor. Puerto Rico's energy strategy increasingly resembles the fuel barge that just ran aground on the rocks. We're stuck between where we were and where we need to be, engines running but going nowhere, burning expensive diesel just to stay in place while debating whether to patch the hull or abandon the ship for a new vessel. Power barges are expensive, fossil fuel dependent, and environmentally suboptimal. They're also fast, reliable, and available now. The mistake isn't using barges as a bridge, it's confusing the bridge for the destination. If 200 megawatts of barge power buys time to deploy renewables and storage at scale, that's strategic. If it becomes an excuse to delay hard decisions, we're just burning money offshore while the reef tears through the hull. Do batteries and new generation come online to eventually replace these barges? Or do we wake up in 2030 still paying premium rates for temporary power that has become permanent? Headline number 8. The Trump administration authorizes Project Ostos. Trump administration authorized energy exports from the Dominican Republic to Puerto Rico, potentially fast-tracking a 700-megawatt submarine interconnection. If this moves forward, it fundamentally changes Puerto Rico's energy calculus. Some see this as a defeat, an admission we can't generate our own power. Others see opportunity, regional integration that provides stability, redundancy, and competitive pressure on local generators. Both views have merit. The right answer probably looks like this. Use the interconnection as an insurance during peak demand and emergencies while simultaneously fixing domestic generation and accelerating renewables. Diversification isn't dependence if you're also building capacity at home. A 700 megawatt lifeline during a crisis could be the difference between managed load shedding and cascading blackouts. The real question is whether this becomes a catalyst for better planning or a crutch that delays it. Interconnection works if it's a part of an integrated strategy. It fails if it's a substitute for one. Right now, we don't know which we're building, but authorization is a step forward. It creates options we didn't have before. Headline number 9. Puerto Rico approaches a historic 20% renewable energy threshold after years of delay. After more than a decade of setbacks, Puerto Rico is finally approaching a genuine milestone. Large-scale solar and energy storage projects set to come online in 2026 will finally push Puerto Rico beyond the 20% renewable generation threshold. This was supposed to happen years ago. It didn't, but it's happening now. After a decade of delays, utility-scale renewable projects will finally start delivering both electricity and storage to the grid in 2026. Meanwhile, distributed generation has exploded. By the end of September, the island had more than 180,000 net metered customers with installed capacity exceeding 1,335 megawatts, adding about 4,150 new connections per month, meaning more than 10% of electricity users already have on-site solar generation, and most are paired with battery storage. Puerto Rico is simultaneously a leader in residential solar adoption and a laggard in utility-scale renewables. Both facts are true. The 20% threshold matters because it's the difference between renewable energy as a niche experiment and renewable energy as a meaningful grid component. Now that we're generating 20% of power from renewables, you have to build grid infrastructure and operating procedures around intermittency, storage, and distributed generation. That forces institutional learning and investment that wouldn't happen at 5%. It's not the finish line, it's barely the starting line for serious decarbonization. But crossing it demonstrates that utility-scale renewables can actually get built in Puerto Rico, which has been an open question for years. The answer is emerging. Yes, they can. Just very, very slowly. And finally, headline number 10. Construction excise taxes throttle infrastructure build-out, adding costs and delays to critical projects. Here's a story that doesn't get enough attention and was just covered by an excellent article in Forbes. Construction excise taxes are significantly delaying and increasing costs for critical energy infrastructure. Every major generation, transmission, and storage project, in addition to potholes, roads, and other infrastructure projects generally, face a maze of municipal and territorial construction taxes that add millions to project budgets and months to timelines. When you're trying to build desperately needed infrastructure, these taxes aren't just bureaucratic annoyances, they're material obstacles that slow deployment and increase ratepayer costs. The fiscal logic is understandable. Municipalities need revenue, and taxing construction is one of the few levers they have. But when those taxes delay the grid reconstruction that federal funds are paying for, you're effectively using local taxes to prevent federal investment from working. It's self-defeating. The complex landscape for infrastructure development isn't just about financing or permitting, it's about navigating a tax structure that treats grid infrastructure, or any infrastructure, like luxury development instead of essential public service. Some jurisdictions have started creating exemptions or deferrals for critical infrastructure. Those need to become universal policy fast. Otherwise, we're paying twice, once in higher construction costs passed to ratepayers, and again in delayed reliability improvements that cost the economy billions in lost productivity. Tax policy is energy policy, whether we acknowledge it or not. All right, that's your brief. The common thread: Puerto Rico's energy transformation is stumbling forward, regulators catching fund misallocations while approving bad contracts, ratepayers demanding accountability in a system with broken economics, emergency measures restoring capacity while becoming permanent governance, and infrastructure projects advancing despite tax structures designed to slow them down. The fuel barge ran aground, the hull is damaged, and we're burning expensive diesel to stay afloat. But the crew hasn't abandoned ship, some repairs are actually happening, and the tide, slowly, painfully slowly, is starting to come in. Whether we float free or sink in place depends on the next few months and whether momentum turns into genuine velocity. All right, not quite 10 minutes, but I did my very best, and that's what counts. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you like this new news format. Don't forget to engage with our material, share your thoughts, and let us know what you think we missed, got wrong, or completely nailed. All right, talk to you soon.